So I have to say something to you. Just to start, I need to peer over this jungle throng. I feel a bit nervous this morning. I've got that. Anyone else got that little tickle in the throat at the moment? That little coldy thing. So just wondering how I'm going to project. And Tan, I've got a job interview today. So there's about 3 of us in the audience wearing a suit. I walked into the office this morning. Does anyone, if you go into the office wearing a suit, does anyone else get asked if that's your court suit? So that kind of nervousness escalated. And then I was thinking, well, Sly made me nervous as well, because he was saying, Richard, go on stage and be playful. Talk about innovation. Now, actually, I do that a lot of the time, but when someone tells you to do that, Richard, be funny, the nerves start to build. And I when I was writing the slides, I'd got 2 things in mind. One which I was going to do, and I'm still going to do, called Sprint, which a lot of you will know about, but I kind of wanted to give it a bit of a new take. But Sly kept whispering in my ear and saying, don't forget to talk to them about social value. Old hat to me, not playful, not innovative, very important, but old hat. But he kept whispering in my ear. How persuasive can Sly be when he's whispering in your ear, Mark? Very persuasive. So I've tried to put the 2 in together. So I may have bitten off more than I can chew, but we'll see. And actually, as Anne-Louise and Sly started speaking this morning, my confidence started to recover, because you talked about value, Sly, and there's value running all the way through what I'm talking about. And actually, the Sprint case study that I'm going to talk about is largely Brazilian-focused. Then, Anne-Louise, right at the end, you started talking about co-design, and this is what that's about. The other thing we got told, if anyone thought, why on earth is he walking on to the specials playing Scar, was you wanted a jungle theme, didn't you, Sly? And I kind of thought, let's look back at Coventry, late 70s, 80s, specials, iconic Coventry band. And I thought, yeah, we'll play Concrete Jungle, which everyone thinks is about Coventry, probably was about Coventry. Except as you walk up to the council house now, it's this green, verdant swathe. And we're UK City of Culture for 2021. So, here we go. Coventry at night, gleaming away, the 3 spires. And the aims of this presentation are to give you a bit of a cautionary tale. So it starts off really being about how not to do things, even though we won a decent-sized contract. And talk to you about Sprint, which originated at Google Ventures, and talk about the take that we've given to that in terms of being playful in different contexts. And then, no, I'm not allowed to skank, am I? Show you how we're continuing to Sprint and how we're thinking of nesting it as a playful methodology within other projects. So here they are, skanking away. This is the specials, if you didn't know. Very current again in Coventry after all these years. 4 gigs in the ruins of the old cathedral. So a playful use of a holy space, if you like. 4 gigs in the old cathedral. But very iconic. And this fella, skanking away here, DJing at a bar called Draper's on Friday night as part of the Boudica Festival, which is a celebration of women in music and non-binary music. And also current because it gets a strange take. Anyone watch the Sky Blues on Sunday? No one. Oh, no. The Sky Blues played in this kit on Sunday. So they were 2-toned up. They lost. But they were 2-toned up, and a big anti-racism message. And I wanted to put that in the slides on the back of what happened to the English players and the English black players in particular in Bulgaria this week. Anyone know who this is? Thank you, Alan. So Bobby Kennedy, if I'm talking to my students, quite surprisingly to me, a lot of them get an answer out. John F. Kennedy, typically. But I wanted to introduce Bobby Kennedy to introduce the social value theme. And the social value theme, in terms of its connection to Sprint, for me, is about the democratic accessibility of Sprint and about involving stakeholders. And Bobby Kennedy doesn't explicitly, or certainly doesn't name social value, but to me, he talks about social value as he launches his American presidential campaign. This is University of Kansas, 1968. And what Bobby Kennedy says is this. He starts talking about the way in which we measure things, and he starts talking about the way in which, even in 68, the US's gross national product, their way of valuing what is of worth, the country's status, its brilliance, its success. Our gross national product now is over $800 billion a year. And then he talks about what that counts, and it being a judgment of the success of the United States. And he talks about it counting air pollution and cigarette advertising and ambulances to clear our highways of carnage. These are things which we are valuing and using as a statement of worth, is what he says. It counts special locks for our doors and the jails for people who break them. It counts napalm. And counts nuclear warheads and armoured cars for the police to fight the riots in our cities. 1968, the year of Black Uprising. Film Detroit was out last year talking about that. It's me calling a friend. This is the powerful bit for me. It's where he gets lyrical, yet it does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play. It does not include the beauty of our poetry or the strength of our marriages. It measures neither our wit nor our courage, neither our wisdom nor our learning, neither our compassion nor our devotion. It measures everything, in short, except that which makes life worthwhile. So that's the idea of social value. This phrase gets coined years later, and I spend lots of my time measuring this sort of stuff. And if you do it the gold standard way, it becomes an exercise in geekiness. I heard Mark say that suits you a treat. It becomes an exercise in geekiness. You get this huge spreadsheet, and you work across the spreadsheet. Inputs, outputs, and you end up with that figure that you sometimes hear on BBC News where someone says, for every pound of public money invested in this project, £12 of value was created. Because we've actually put a figure on this. And people use big financial proxy databases to do that. I'll come back to that. So park that thought here. And now I take you off to Brazil. And just at the point where I stopped freelancing and came back into the university, we won this project. And it was around creative economy assessment and training in Brazil. And if I say it myself, the British Council loved our bid. Yes, I'm back. I'm a star. So what we said was we'd go out to Brazil, spot the flaws in this. We'd go out to Brazil as a British Council-funded project, and we would do a diagnostic. We would determine where the creative economy was lacking in Brazil based on existing British Council pathways, and then we would deploy different members of the university. They would drop in, they would work, of course, with the Brazilian creative economy, and they would build something better. Looking back on it, it had the subtlety of, remember these, yellow submarines? The glove that used to fly around smashing things up. So when I was out there doing the work, master maker and not a master maker. We did lots of worthy stuff. We went out and saw people, and pretty well became obvious that there was relatively little that we could offer in terms of additional expertise. And the old brain cogs start working in terms, all right, this is the global north doing to the global south, isn't it? British Council funding, UK university, so-called experts, deficit model, etc., etc., etc. And we tried to unravel what we'd offered to the British Council and come up with something different, and we did, and it was playful and certainly had elements of social innovation. And he's crept away. He was loitering at the back. But I came under the influence, Sly, of this gentleman. I'm not sure how that one crept in, but of this gentleman. You can see me at the front, demurely there, fresh-faced, and Alan at the back. So Alan introduced me to playful methodology. So from that original take on experts going out, deploying experts, and experts working with, but it's still experts unto, we end up with this. This is São Paulo 12 months ago, Instituto Feira Preta. It's a black women's empowerment group. Spot the flaws in this. The British Council tasked Global North going to Global South, white bloke going to support a black women's empowerment group in Brazil. Although it worked, somehow the playful methodology pulled it off, although we did talk about the power dynamics within it. And what we started doing was working with a sprint methodology, which Alan was passionate about, still is passionate about, and made me passionate about. And what Google Ventures sold this as was kind of greatest hits of business planning and innovation. Pull together all those books that you would never buy unless you were at an airport and condense their good practice into one and give it the credibility of Google Ventures, this big financial tech investment company, and give it a 5-day focus. So the premise of Google Ventures was basically, we go out, we spend a load of time with tech companies, they come up with really cool stuff, we then go away, we leave them to get on with it. 12 months later, they've done nothing because they're after the perfect thing. But actually, if we could work with them for 5 days and actually stop with them, and we can all afford that, and push them into the prototype, then we can have a success. Alan, you've missed your picture. I know. The best half, though. So what you do with sprints, and this is the playful bit, is you draw. So we introduced to a room full of mentors and creatives and business people who are expecting to produce a 5-volume business plan. We basically give them flip chart and pens and tell them all they're going to do is draw. And through that, we make something accessible and democratic, if we go back to that social value point, which I parked here, if you remember. Because anyone can do it, and they're equals. And unless you've got the brilliant architectural drawing technician in the room, everyone's equally bad. Well, maybe not bad. At least they've got an equal playing field. And what we argue with them at the start when they don't want to draw is, you'll remember this. Those finely crafted words that you have spent ages over, wondering whether "the" is the right word or whether it should be "that." Actually, because you've drawn something funky and different, you will remember that. And actually, as you do it, the different sides of your brain will connect. And you'll do it quickly, so you'll avoid paralysis by analysis. That's searching for that right word. And dare I say it, you will have fun. So I'm very aware that I've now put a chicken in a sweater on the screen, and I kind of feel the need to explain myself putting a chicken in a sweater. Anyone else from Coventry in the room? Sky blue sweater? Spot the motif running through this? I think that what I wanted to do at this stage was connect that challenge which, I'm not sure Sly actually gave me, but the challenge which I heard from Sly, which was to talk about playfulness and social innovation, but also to talk about the social value of that. And that came through the keynote presentation, the value of play. So think about when I was talking about measuring social value, I was saying that the gold standard way, or the received gold standard way, is to work through a big Excel spreadsheet. I did that for this project. This is a £1,000 project. And the £1,000 project was a community group in Coventry saying, we need more community, we like animals, we'll have a chicken coop, please. So what do you do? Anyone, what do you do if you have a chicken coop? Anyone? Get chickens. So this group of animal lovers, they go out and they get battery hens. They rescue battery hens. Anyone buy battery eggs? I've been on a steep learning curve about chickens. I now know more than any man should reasonably know about chickens. The reason she looks a bit turkey-like is to get them in those little battery hen containers, they kind of crush them in. And they don't see much light, so the feathers fall out. Which is why she's got a bare bottom. To get them in these little containers, they have to chop the wings off. They grow back. So when they're rescued and they're at Henley Green in this chicken coop, they become plump again. I had this absolutely amazing conversation. I got drawn into it and I realised the way it was going with one of my students. It was 2 years ago. And I could see, as I was saying to him, the chicken wings grow back. I could see his eyes lighting up. You know where I'm going with this, don't you? His eyes lit up. He was like, Rich, so if you chop off chicken wings, they grow back? Yeah. Really? Yeah. The chicken wings grow back. And he was thinking of buckets of chicken wings and this endless... No, not chicken wings in that sense. It was bizarre. So anyway, where am I going with this? I'm starting to talk about the importance of narrative because in terms of sprint, the key thing for me is the fun, the narrative, the playfulness, and that narrative starts to move into social innovation. In the same way as once they rescue these chickens, the reason she's wearing a sweater is chickens are like bulls. They hate red. They go for red. So if your chicken has newly been rescued from the battery crate, lost a load of feathers, looks like me when I've shaved, lots of little red marks. You throw her into the chicken coop with the other chickens will go for her. The community had a knitting circle, so they started knitting little chicken sweaters. Keeps them warm in winter, but also covers up those red marks. So what's this got to do with narrative and social value and playfulness and social innovation? Well, they're starting to create. And they're starting to talk. And they're starting to invigorate conversations at bus stops. What are you doing in the knitting circle at the moment? We're knitting sweaters for chickens. What? And the chickens start creating this own, I don't know, it's weird, this own narrative, playfulness, social innovation. They escape. They get brought back. There's a nursery and a primary school next to where the chicken coop was. A couple of times a year, an unsuspecting chicken would get plucked up and taken into the school and would become part of an education project. Class, where do eggs come from? Johnny? Asdamis. Yes, before they go to Asda. So it becomes this educational type thing, and we did some interviews on the estate, and it was just like Hollywood after Hollywood after Hollywood. Regan, who was, I don't know, a bit of a wannabe gangster, kept chased by the old Bill around the estate all the time. Ends up volunteering, mucking out chickens. Gets an apprenticeship in the cafe. And the cafe's takings grow because they're using local produce. Playfulness, social innovation. And I think capturing the true meaning of social value rather than doing that big geeky spreadsheet, which took me 14 days to say that every pound invested in that project created X amount of value. And also becomes a little bit of an antidote to some of the high-tech stuff, the big data stuff. So this was in The Guardian this week. It's been quite thematic in terms of the way in which local authorities and other welfare agencies are starting to use tech and big data and algorithms to basically, perhaps not intentionally, but punish the poor. Tam, because you're like this, we can predict that you're going to act like that, even though you might not. Because we have a big data set that demonstrates you're going to act like that. Had an example of that around social value, and it was around these big financial proxies. So there are data sets out there that will say, actually, Sinead, if I make you more confident, it's worth that much. Because I've got a big data set which says what an average Sinead will benefit from. So I was out on at a conference, and this regeneration team were telling me that on this housing estate, the community said, this is what we want. This is what we need. But we talked them out of it. We demonstrated through the big data set they get more value from this. What? You've taken away their voice. You've disempowered them. You've probably given them the wrong solution because you haven't listened to what they said. You certainly haven't heard it. In the same way, what I'm going to argue coming towards the end of the session is the way in which we implemented Sprint, Alan and I, gave a voice to those creative entrepreneurs and those communities, and did it in a way that our original vision, actually my original vision, wouldn't have done, didn't do. British Council wouldn't have done, didn't do. So Sprint's basically a disruptive business planning experience. It's disruptive because we don't let you do what you think you're going to do as part of a business planning rapid prototyping exercise. I want to write, I want to plan. You've got to draw. What? All right then. And then the laughter starts, and then the enjoyment starts, and what you get is a big picture testing of new ideas. It's interesting, this clicker. There we go. And what it does, in the name of the title, Sprint, it allows rapid problem solving. And it takes you away from this sort of scenario. This is what my boss thinks I do. Sit at my desk, cogitate, and then actually wake up long enough just to shift my deadlines away. And the danger of business planning is actually it does lead you into that position. You can keep producing that business plan forever and ever. You have this aim of social innovation, but you're never going to do it because you're just going to build in more and more time. Whereas through Sprint, what we want you is like this. There's an animal theme today, isn't there? Who'd have thought of that? Jungles, yeah, okay, all right. But this is sort of the pace that we want. And this is the pace that actually we get. And the pace we get because Alan has introduced at Coventry a series of micro sprints where that 5-day Google Ventures process gets condensed. And by the time I was out in São Paulo doing the exercise with Instituto Feira Preta, we're down to 3 hours for a sprint. Super accessible. No animals were harmed in the making of it anyway. Ding dong. Who knows? So there's 5 key parts of a sprint, and this is as simple and as complicated as it gets. You identify the key challenge, and then you flip the language so you're talking about key opportunity for, in this case, a creative entrepreneur. And you draw it. And typically, you get something where you can, I think for the best ones, you get something where you can hear the emotion from the drawing. You then identify the target market. And what tends to happen as you're doing it in real time is draw the big opportunity challenge, pin it to the wall, explain what it is so you're all on the same page, literally and metaphorically, and then draw the target market. So they go scurrying up with the blue tack and the flip chart to put the target market next to the big opportunity. No, hold on, don't put it there. Bring it over here. Why have I got to pin my flip chart about 5 yards away from the first picture? Well, all gets quite theatrical. I want you to talk about how you're going to bring those two together. So you then start generating ideas for how, theatrically, this big idea can be realised, getting your steps in, with this target market here. And you, out of range. Start then from that, storyboarding what the solutions can be, and then market testing it. So with a little bit more detail and a little bit more iteration, this is kind of literally what it looks like. So this was Recife, cultural difference, UK, Brazil. Creative economy, what's your big opportunity? Gastronomy. What, you mean food? No, but gastronomy. And they start talking about, in terms of drawing the big opportunity, something which is sustainable, which is from the earth. You can see the roots of it. You can taste it, absolutely, but you've got the visual cue and clue. You've got the aroma of the food as well. Okay, now I'm starting to get it. So having done that, they start sketching out, we let them write a bit, the target market, and starting to disaggregate what that target market would be and make it a little bit more sophisticated. And then the how might we element, just brainstorming really rapidly. The sound desk is shaking their heads at me. Really rapidly getting these post-it notes up. These are a bit neat, to be honest. We like something a bit wilder, but this is the one that we took the picture of. And then the storyboarding, comic strip, and then build it. And the build it, you can only build it with the stuff that you've got in the room. With one exception, I guess. But you would basically say, you want to prototype a car? Here you are. This is all you can use. You want to prototype an app? We had one person stood either side of this little cardboard box, pulling pieces of paper through to demonstrate the app, but it worked. It tested it. It showed the parameters of the app. They started watching the response that they got to different things that they were pulling through. They got something which they knew either worked or failed. This is, rather bizarrely, rapid prototyping of a tourist experience in rural Pernambuco. They made these weird Brazilian paper hats, found a bit of green carpet, and enacted a whole play about the experience that you would get of meeting someone and engaging in that sort of world. This is a digital game. This is the journey of the creative entrepreneur. It's kind of a bit like Snakes and Ladders, really. But again, it was something that we wanted to take back, bring back here, and prototype further. So I said there was one exception, didn't I? The one exception to you can only use what's in the room is, even though I'm quite lo-fi, and that's probably come through, they can connect to the web. So in an hour, one team made a film. And we made a book. Alan and I only publish in Portuguese. So should you be interested, got a 4-volume Portuguese. There's a bit of an irony in it being four volumes. And it's called Sprint. They're thin. And we have got a PDF if you want to see that, which is in English. And the book captures everything I've talked about. So, almost closing thoughts, because I've got a 1-minute video clip to show. I wave at the person who's just waved me 5 minutes from the back of the room. He's waving me 3 minutes now. He's now standing on one leg. Anyway, I should get back to doing the presentation instead of chatting to you. Almost closing thoughts. The idea about playfulness, about innovation, about sprint, about social value, the key to me is something that's accessible and is democratic. And certainly in tune with creative approaches. When I look back at that bid document and how heavy it was and how worthy it was and how top-down it was and how done, I can barely even say it. So I think we're looking for something which is experiential. And we started nesting the sprint approach in something else I've nicked off Alan. Lego a Go-Go, and starting nesting it around business model canvas and techniques to nudge people. Nudge people in an ethical sense. We've got a whole research strand at the moment going around how there are dangers in nudge and the way in which you can nudge people into doing what they don't want to do, and how ethical that may or may not be. So kind of the finale is this little bit of film. This is a group in Maceió, Alagoas. In an hour, they produced this. The big challenge they thought was creative entrepreneurs in Alagoas were incredibly talented but didn't know where to go to get support. They needed to get mentors. But they didn't actually know what they didn't know, so they didn't know they needed to get mentors. So what this group of about half a dozen people did was they used what was in the room to tell the story, to create a screenplay of how those creative entrepreneurs, often in quite rural and quite poor areas, should connect to them as an agency of mentors. And Alan and I said to them, all you can use to build this prototype is what you've got in the room. We've only got our lunch in the room. What are we going to do? So what they did is this. Will it click through on me, or do you need to click through? Oops. I might have to click through on the screen. I shouldn't really have another slide after that, should I? So stating the obvious, the bananas, their characters, the paper cups, the mentors, little sad faces transform to happy faces. They then roll this out as an agency, but I think that the power is then rolling it out, but bear in mind the graphics, the music, they all downloaded in the hour. The film they made in the hour, they stitched it all together in that hour, and that wasn't a particularly unique experience. It's the nicest one to use if you're presenting because, I don't know, it's just theatrical and visual. But the playful methodology created things like that time after time after time. I guess it made me think about whether we should have, I don't know, it's getting a bit grand, isn't it now? Pompous maybe. Manifesto for Social Innovation, which is absolutely around co-design. And moving away from what was I thinking when I wrote that bid in 2017? I guess I was thinking about, I need to get the money for the university. I kind of lost sight when I was writing the bid in terms of that co-design. And actually thinking about co-design being of and by as well as for, but in amongst all the wonderful techie stuff that we have, not forgetting lo-fi in terms of social innovation and playfulness. Thank you very much.